The taxi jolted to a stop in front of iron gates taller than any house Awa had ever seen. Her heart hammered as the driver muttered, "Here we are." She stepped out, clutching a worn canvas bag in one hand and pressing her fingers against a small red pearl necklace hidden beneath her blouse. The gates groaned open, revealing a mansion of glass and stone, its windows staring down like cold eyes. Awa's breath caught. She whispered to herself, "Don't be afraid. Just walk." Gravel crunched under her sandals as she entered. The morning air smelled of trimmed roses, but the silence in the grounds felt unnatural, like a place where even birds refused to sing. Before she could knock, the door swung open. A woman with a lined face and sharp voice stood there. "You must be the girl Father Andre sent." "Yes, madam," Awa said softly. The woman squinted, then shook her head. "Not madam. Call me Mama Abby. I've run this house longer than you've been alive. Follow me." Inside, the air was heavy with polish and old wood. The hall stretched wide, but shadows clung to the corners. Awa's eyes darted over paintings of stern ancestors whose gazes followed her steps. Mama Abby's voice echoed as they climbed the marble staircase. "You work hard, you keep quiet, and you'll survive here. That is all." They reached the tall door. Mama Abby paused. "This is where you'll meet her, Madam Kenny." She knocked once and pushed Awa inside. Behind a large desk sat a woman in her 50s, elegant yet severe, dressed in a silk robe the color of midnight. She did not rise. Her eyes, cold, searching, unblinking, locked onto Awa. "So, you're the new maid." Her voice was smooth but carried steel. "Yes, madam," Awa whispered. "Speak clearly. I dislike weak voices." Madam Kenny stood slowly, her height commanding the room. She circled Awa like a hawk assessing prey. "You are young. Strong enough, I suppose. Listen well. In this house, there are rules." Awa straightened, though her palms sweated. "No questions. No wandering. You work when told, rest when allowed. You eat only after the family. And most of all," Madam Kenny stopped inches from her face, her gaze drilling into her, "you will never enter my private study. Ever." "Yes, madam." Their eyes locked for a moment too long. A flicker passed over Madam Kenny's face, something sharp unsettled, before she turned away briskly. "Mama Abby, show her to the servants' quarters." Awa bowed and followed, her mind racing. Why had Madam Kenny looked at her that way? It felt less like inspection and more like recognition. They passed endless corridors lined with locked doors. At last, they reached a narrow wooden stairwell that creaked under their steps. Down below, Mama Abby stopped at a cramped room. "This is yours. Don't complain. Many have slept in worse." The room held only a cot, a chip basin, and a cracked mirror. Awa sat on the bed, her chest tight. Mama Abby studied her, softer now. "You have gentle eyes. Keep your head down, child. Madam Kenny does not forgive mistakes." "Yes, Mama." With that, the housekeeper left, her steps fading into the silence of the house. Night fell quickly, and the mansion grew colder, quieter, like a tomb. Awa lit the small lamp by her bed, her hands trembling. She pulled the red pearl necklace from beneath her blouse. Its glow was faint, but to her it was fire. She pressed it against her lips. Her voice cracked in the stillness. "Mama Sarah, you told me one day this necklace would lead me to my truth. But where am I now? Who am I to them?" Her eyes filled, but she refused to let tears fall. Instead, she whispered with a trembling smile, one day, you will tell me who I am." The lamp flickered. Outside, a floorboard creaked in the dark hallway. Awa froze, clutching the necklace tight, unaware that beyond her door, unseen eyes were watching. The dawn bell of the church echoed faintly in the distance as Awa woke to the chill of the basement room, her breath fogged in the dim light. She dressed quickly, clutching her necklace once before hiding it beneath her blouse. When she stepped into the kitchen, Mama Abby was already bustling, chopping herbs with quick, precise strokes. "You're late," the housekeeper snapped without looking up. "I'm sorry, Mama," Awa whispered. "Sorry won't save you here. Work will." She shoved a basket of laundry into Awa's arms. Take these to the courtyard. And hurry. Awa bowed her head and carried the pile outside. The mansion's courtyard opened before her like another world. Fountains glimmered, flowers lined the paths, but not a soul enjoyed them. It was beauty without warmth, like a painting frozen in glass. As she spread sheets under the pale sun, a voice startled her. "You're new." Awa turned. A gardener stood by the hibiscus bushes, young, dusty, with a mischievous smile. "I'm Kareem," he said, wiping his brow. "I see they caught another bird in cage." "I'm just here to work," Awa murmured, folding her eyes downward. Kareem chuckled. "That's what they all say. But no one leaves here without scars." Before Awa could ask what he meant, Mama Abby's voice thundered from the doorway. "Kareem!" Back to the garden. "And you," Awa moved faster. Kareem winked and slipped away, leaving unease in Awa's chest. By noon, her hands ached from scrubbing marble floors. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets. When she carried polished dishes to the dining hall, she slowed, stunned. The long table gleamed with silver and crystal. Madam Kenny sat at the head, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. She raised a finger without looking at Awa. "There's a smudge on that glass." Awa's cheeks burned. She bowed low. "Forgive me, madam." The older woman finally turned her gaze on her, piercing, sharp, lingering a heartbeat too long. Awa felt stripped bare, as if those eyes were digging for something hidden. Madam Kenny said nothing more, but the silence was heavier than scolding. Awa quickly retreated, her stomach twisting. The hours crawled. Shadows lengthened. At dusk, Mama Abby brought her a small bowl of rice. "Eat," she ordered. Awa sat quietly in the corner. She dared ask, "Mama Abby, why is the house so silent? There are no children, no laughter." The housekeeper froze, knife in midair. Her eyes narrowed. "There are things you must never ask here. Do you hear me?" Awa nodded quickly, but her mind burned with more questions. That night, she cleaned the west corridor, dust thick on the shelves. Her rag brushed a framed photograph half buried behind books. She pulled it free, curious. The faded picture showed Madam Kenny, young, radiant, but unmistakable, her belly swollen with pregnancy. Awa's breath caught. She stared until footsteps echoed down the hall. Heart racing, she shoved the frame back and returned to scrubbing just as Madam Kenny appeared. "What are you doing here?" Madam's voice was sharp. "Cleaning, madam," Awa whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. Madam Kenny's gaze swept the shelf. For a moment her face paled, but she quickly masked it. "Do not linger here." "Go!" Awa fled, but the image of the photograph burned in her mind. Madam Kenny with child, back in her room. She could not sleep. She clutched her necklace, whispering, "Is this connected to me?" Outside, wind howled against the shutters. Somewhere deep in the mansion, a door slammed, though no one was there. The silence of the house thickened into something alive, watching. And in her sleep, Madam Kenny dreamed of a crying infant she had once sworn to forget. She woke in the dark, trembling, whispering only one word. "Why?" The storm had passed, but the mansion still felt heavy, as if it swallowed the thunder whole. Awa rose before dawn, her body sore, her mind restless with the memory of the photograph. She touched her necklace beneath her blouse and whispered, "Mama Sarah, guide me." By the time she reached the dining hall, Madam Kenny was already seated, sipping dark coffee. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of the silver spoon. "Pour," Madam commanded without looking up. Awa steadied her hands and filled the porcelain cup. She could feel Madam's eyes on her, sharp as knives. "You move quietly," the older woman said finally. Too quietly, like someone with secrets. Awa froze. "I have no secrets, madam." Madam Kenny smirked faintly. "Everyone has secrets. Remember that." Before Awa could respond, the door opened. A tall woman swept in, jewels glittering, perfume filling the air. "Kenny," she sang, embracing the madam. "It's been too long." "Yenda," Madam Kenny said coolly, though her lips softened. Yenda's gaze shifted to Awa. "And who is this little one?" The new maid, Kenny replied sharply. Yenda tilted her head, studying Awa. Pretty girl. Too pretty for scrubbing floors. Awa lowered her eyes, cheeks burning. Madam Kenny's voice turned icy. She is here to work. Nothing else. The tension sliced the room until Yenda laughed lightly and turned away. But Awa caught the flicker of anger in Madam Kenny's eyes, as though Yenda had touched a raw nerve. Later, in the courtyard, Mama Abby found Awa hanging linens. The old woman's face was stern, but her voice softened. Be careful with Madam's friends. They have sharper tongues than knives. Awa dared ask, Mama, that photograph I saw, was Madam Kenny ever? The housekeeper's face darkened. Enough. Do not speak of things that are buried. You want to lose this roof over your head. Awa bit her lip, but her heart pounded. Buried things, secrets, a child once in her belly. Could it be connected to me? As the day wore on, Awa caught small signs, drawers that locked with trembling hands. Glances Madam Kenny quickly hid. A lullaby hummed under her breath when she thought no one was near. That evening, Awa carried a tray to the study. Madam Kenny sat at her desk, staring at an old wooden box. When Awa entered, she slammed the lid shut. Leave it there, she snapped. Awa placed a tray, but her eyes flicked to the box. A strip of fabric had caught in the lid, soft pink, like a baby's bonnet. Her breath caught. Madam's gaze followed hers. Out, Kenny barked. Awa obeyed, her legs trembling. Behind her, she thought she heard a whisper, Madam Kenny's voice, low and cracked. Why now, Wire? That night, Awa tossed on her cot. She held her necklace, her mind burning with questions. She remembered Mama Sira's words. One day, this will show you the truth. In the dark, she whispered, What truth, Mama? Why do I feel the answers are inside this house? Unbeknownst to her, Madam Kenny sat awake as well, clutching the wooden box against her chest, rocking slightly as though it held a living child. Her whisper was harsher, filled with regret. I buried you. I buried everything. Why does this girl make me see you again? The wind howled through the chimney, carrying their unspoken cries to the silent halls. And in the shadows outside Awa's door, Mama Abby stood frozen, her eyes wet. She had heard both women's whispers. She knew the storm of truth was coming. The next morning, Awa was shaken awake by Mama Abby's rough hand. Up, girl. Madam wants you in the east wing. Don't keep her waiting. Still groggy, Awa pulled herself in the cot, her necklace cool against her skin. She hurried through narrow corridors until she reached the east parlor, a room so grand it made her heart pound. Velvet curtains, golden mirrors, chandeliers heavy with crystal. Madam Kenny sat in an armchair, her posture sharp as a blade. Beside her, Aunt Mariette, an older woman with hawk-like eyes, watched Awa with unsettling interest. This is the new maid, the aunt sneered. She looks familiar. Awa bowed low, her stomach twisting. Madam Kenny's eyes flicked with something like panic before hardening again. She is no one. She works. That is all. But Aunt Mariette leaned closer, her voice cutting. No one, you say? Sometimes the past walks back into our lives dressed as servants. Madam Kenny's teacup clinked too loudly against its saucer. Enough! Her tone was final, but her hands trembled. Awa felt the heat of those words in her chest. The past? What did the aunt mean? All day, her tasks blurred, sweeping, dusting, carrying trays, but her thoughts burned. Every glance Madam Kenny gave her seemed sharper, almost fearful, as if the older woman were seeing a ghost. By late afternoon, Kareem found her in the laundry yard, her eyes clouded. You look haunted, he teased gently. I'm fine, Awa murmured, scrubbing harder. No one's fine in this house. It eats people from the inside, Kareem said, lowering his voice. They say Madam once had a child, but the child disappeared. Awa froze, her knuckles white. Disappeared? Kareem shrugged. That's the story. Some say the baby died. Some say it was given away. Who knows? But you see why the house is so quiet. No laughter. Only ghosts. Mama Abby's voice thundered behind them. Kareem, enough of your poisoned tongue. Her glare cut into Awa too. And you, don't listen to idle gossip. It will drown you. But the seed was planted. Awa could think of nothing else. That night, while the house lay still, she wandered the corridor near the study. A faint glow leaked from under the door. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Slowly, she pressed her ear against the wood. Inside, Madame Kenny's voice broke in shivers. Why does she carry the same eyes? Why that necklace? God, why now? A drawer slammed shut. Footsteps approached. Alice stumbled back into the shadows just as the door creaked open. Madame Kenny stepped out, clutching the wooden box against her chest. For a moment, her face crumbled, tears glistening. Then she straightened, cold again, and swept down the hall. Alice's hand shook. The same eyes. The necklace. She's speaking about me. She slipped into her small room, shut the door, and pressed her necklace hard into her palm. What are you hiding from me? She whispered into the silence. But sleep did not come. The walls seemed to pulse with secrets, every creak of the house a whisper of truth pressing closer. By dawn, she knew one thing. She could no longer remain silent. The rain came that morning in thin silver sheets, tapping against the tall windows of the grand house. Awa worked in silence, polishing the long hallway floor, her mind restless. Every word Kareem had whispered, every tremor in Madame Kenny's voice, every warning from Mama Abby tangled inside her. At last, she could no longer resist. When the house quieted, she crept back to the corridor outside Madame Kenny's study. The heavy door loomed before her, locked as always, but narrow cabinets stood nearby, half open. Awa pulled gently, and inside lay old linens, yellow with time. Buried beneath them was a small tin box. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside rested a bundle of tiny clothes, delicate hand-stitched, smelling faintly of lavender long faded, and at the very bottom, a bonnet trimmed with pink lace. Her breath caught. It was the same fabric she had glimpsed trapped in Madame Kenny's wooden box. A child! Awa whispered, her throat tight. The sound of footsteps snapped her back. She stuffed the bundle into the box, shoved it closed, and darted away just as Madame Kenny's heels clicked on the marble floor. The older woman paused in the hallway, her eyes narrowing. She scanned the space, lips pressing thin. For a moment, Awa thought she could feel those piercing eyes right through the wall where she hid. Later that afternoon, Yender returned, sweeping into the parlor with her laugh that cut like glass. Kenny, you look pale. Still haunted by old ghosts. Madame Kenny stiffened. I do not believe in ghosts. Yenda smirked, leaning close. Maybe not, but sometimes the past has a way of knocking on the door in flesh and blood. Awa, thus in the corner, froze. She dared glance, saw Madame Kenny's hand grip the armrest until her knuckles whitened. When Yenda finally left, slamming perfume into the air, Madame Kenny whispered under her breath. Unaware Awa was still near. She cannot be. She must not be. That night, Awa sat on her cot, the red pearl necklace glowing faintly in the lamplight. She pressed it between her palms, her voice breaking. Mama Sarah, you told me this would show me the truth. Was it hers? Did it come from this house? Her tears slid silently, but determination flared beneath them. She rose, clutching her lamp, and tiptoed to the sleeping house. Shadows stretched across the walls like watchful eyes. She reached the storage attic, dust-thick, cobwebs hanging like curtains. She searched frantically through trunks and boxes, her heart drumming. Then, beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets, she found another photograph. This one showed Madame Kenny younger, holding a swaddled infant in her arms. Awa's knees weakened. The child's bonnet, the same pink lace. Her hand shook so violently the picture nearly slipped. She pressed it against her chest, whispering. It was true. She had a child. Behind her, a board creaked. Awa spun, her lamp nearly falling. Mama Abby stood in the shadows, her eyes glistening. You should not be here, the housekeeper said softly, but her voice lacked its usual harshness. Tell me the truth, Mama, Awa begged, tears in her voice. Was the child hers? Was she abandoned? For a long moment, Mama Abby said nothing. The silence was deafening. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Some truths burn when spoken." Awa's breath trembled. "Then let them burn." Mama Abby turned away, her figure sinking into the darkness. "Not tonight, child. Not tonight." The attic door closed, leaving Awa alone with the photograph pressed to her chest. But outside, the storm rose again, rattling the windows as though the house itself was demanding the secrets be torn open. Sparkle's word count, 751. Next, in Chapter 6, the story will hit a major turning point. Madam Kenny can no longer deny the truth. Awa pushes closer, and the red necklace becomes the undeniable proof. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the estate wrapped in a heavy stillness. The gardens glistened with dew, but inside the house, the air felt brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Awa moved through her chores, her thoughts consumed by the photograph hidden beneath her pillow. Madam Kenny younger, smiling faintly, holding a child. Her child, the same lace bonnet, the same aura of secrecy. But if the child was real, where had she gone? In the dining hall, Madam Kenny sat rigid at the head of the table, untouched tea cooling at her side. Mama Abby hovered nearby, silent, tense. Awa carried in the tray, careful to keep her eyes lowered. Yet when Madam Kenny spoke, her voice cut like a blade. "You," she said sharply, "why do you always stare at me?" Awa froze. "Madam, I—" "Do not lie." Kenny's eyes narrowed, searching her face. "There is something in you, something I cannot place." Mama Abby quickly intervened. "She means no harm, madam. The girl is quiet, diligent." "Enough," Kenny snapped. The china rattled under her hand. "Diligence I can buy. Silence I can demand. But that look—" She faltered, her voice trembling for the first time. "That look I know." Awa's throat tightened. For a heartbeat, she thought Kenny might say the words she longed to hear. But instead, the older woman rose abruptly, her chair scraping the marble. "I will not be haunted in my own house," Kenny hissed. "If you cannot work without questions, then leave." The words struck like a lash. Awa lowered her eyes, hiding the storm in them. "Yes, madam." That evening, as the lamps flickered low, Awa stood at the window of her small room. The red pearl necklace glowed faintly in her hand. She pressed it to her lips, whispering, "One day you will tell me. One day you will see me." Her resolve hardened. She could not run. Not yet. Downstairs, Madam Kenny paced her study, the wooden box open before her. Inside lay the same lace bonnet, carefully preserved, alongside a tiny rattle. Her fingers lingered on them, her breath uneven. "She cannot be," Kenny whispered to herself. "Not after all these years." A knock startled her. It was Yinda, entering with her usual sly smile. "Kenny, you look ill. Has your little mate stirred your ghost again?" "Leave me, Yinda." But Yinda only drew closer, her voice dripping with poison. "You buried the past, my dear, but sometimes the earth spits it back up. That girl, she has your eyes, don't you see it?" Madam Kenny flinched as if struck. "You know nothing." "Oh, but I do," Yinda whispered. "And if you don't claim her, someone else will." The room fell into suffocating silence. Then Madam Kenny shouted, "Get out!" Yinda laughed coldly, her heels echoing as she left the study. That night, unable to sleep, Awa returned to the attic. She sat with a photograph in her lap, the necklace against her chest. Every fragment pointed to one truth, but she needed proof. Undeniable, impossible to deny. Suddenly, she heard movement below. A door creaked open. Quiet footsteps ascended the stairs. She blew out her lamp, heart hammering, hiding in the shadows. The figure came into view, Madam Kenny herself, pale and restless, carrying a candle. She walked to the very trunk Awa had searched before and lifted the bonnet with trembling hands. Her voice broke the silence, soft, ragged. "My baby, I am sorry." Tears slid down her face, catching in the candlelight. For the first time, Awa saw not the cold madam, but a grieving mother. Awa's breath escaped in a gasp. The sound gave her away. Kenny spun, eyes wide, candlelight trembling. Her gaze fell on the photograph clutched in Awa's hand. For a long, shattering moment, neither spoke. Then Madam Kenny whispered, her voice breaking apart. "Where did you get that?" Awa's hand tightened on the picture, her voice trembling yet unyielding. "Tell me, madam, who is she? Who am I?" The flame wavered. Kenny's lips parted, but no words came. The candle flickered violently and went out, plunging them into darkness. The house lay in silence, but inside Madam Kenny's study, the air crackled with tension. The candle had been relit, yet its flame shook as though it, too, feared what hovered between them. Alice stood in the corner, the photograph clutched to her chest. Madam Kenny faced her, pale, her breath uneven. "Give it to me," Kenny demanded, her voice trembling more than she wished. Awa shook her head. "Not until you tell me. Who is the child in this picture?" Kenny's lips parted, then pressed tight again. She looked away, as if the walls themselves might shield her. "She is no one. A mistake. A shadow I buried long ago." "No one." Awa's voice broke, rising sharp. "Then why do you keep her clothes? Why hide her bonnet like treasure?" Kenny's hand trembled as it gripped the desk. "Enough." But Alice stepped closer, tears burning her eyes. "Tell me the truth. Who is she? Who am I?" For a long, brutal silence. The only sound was the storm outside, the rain lashing against the glass. Then Kenny whispered, almost choking on the words, "She was my child." The room tilted. Awa's knees weakened. Her breath caught in her chest. She had expected it, longed for it, but hearing it aloud shattered something inside her. Kenny sank into her chair, covering her face with trembling hands. "She was taken from me. They told me she died. And yet, sometimes I feel her still." Her eyes lifted, wet, uncertain. "And now you stand before me." Awa's tears spilled, but she forced herself to speak. Slowly, she unclasped the red pearl necklace, holding it out in her shaking palm. "Then explain this. My mother, the only mother I ever knew, gave it to me. She said it would tell me who I am. Is it yours?" The pearl caught the candlelight, glowing like a drop of blood. Madam Kenny gasped, her face drained of all color. "That necklace!" Her voice cracked raw. "It was mine. It was the last thing tied to her, to you." Awa's hand trembled harder. "So it's true? I am the child you lost." Before Kenny could answer, the door burst open. Yenda swept in, her eyes glinting like knives. She had been listening, her smile cold and triumphant. "Well," she drawled, "what a performance. The long-lost daughter returns. How touching." Kenny shot to her feet. "Get out!" But Yenda only laughed, circling the room like a predator. "You think society will forgive you, Kenny? A wealthy widow, pretending perfection, hiding a bastard child all these years? If this truth comes out, your name, your wealth, your legacy, it all burns." Awa's breath hitched, fury rising in her chest. "Enough! She is my mother, and I have the right to know." Yenda turned sharply, her voice dripping with venom. "And what will you do with that truth, girl? Claim her fortune? Ruin her standing? Or drag her shame into the light?" Madam Kenny stood frozen, torn between silence and confession. Her eyes darted between them, her chest heaving. Awa clutched the necklace tightly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I never wanted her fortune. I only wanted to know who I am. I only wanted a mother." For a moment, Kenny's face crumbled, the mask shattering. She reached out a trembling hand, hesitant, yearning. But Yenda struck again, her words slicing. "If you accept her, Kenny, you destroy yourself. Don't be a fool. Cast the girl out before it's too late." The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. Awa's tears fell, one after another, but she stood her ground. "Choose, madam," she whispered. "Truth or lies, mother or stranger." The silence that followed was unbearable. Madam Kenny's hand hovered in the air, suspended between past and present, fear and love. The candle guttered low, shadows stretching long across the floor. Finally, Kenny's voice broke, raw and unsteady. I cannot." The words fell like a blade. Awa's heart cracked open. She staggered back, her necklace slipping from her fingers onto the marble floor with a sharp, echoing clang. Her voice was a whisper, shattered. Then I was a fool to believe you. She fled the room, the sound of her sobs swallowed by the storm outside. Behind her, Madame Kenny collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, as Yenda's cold laughter filled the air. The rain had stopped by morning, but the house felt even heavier, as if the storm had moved inside its walls. Awa had not slept. She sat on her small cot, her eyes swollen from tears, staring at the red pearl necklace now resting broken on the floor. Every word from the night before replayed like a wound. I cannot. By mid-morning, she rose. Her body was weak, but her spirit refused to collapse. She gathered her few belongings, folded her plain dress, and placed the necklace carefully inside. She would leave. As she stepped into the corridor, Mama Abby appeared, blocking her path. Her eyes, usually sharp, were soft with sorrow. "You're running away?" she asked quietly. Awa's lips trembled. "What else is left?" "She denied me." Mama Abby shook her head. "No, child, she denied herself. But the truth does not vanish just because fear silences it." Tears stung Awa's eyes again, but she forced herself forward. "I cannot beg for love." Abby touched her arm gently. "Sometimes love must be fought for, even when it hides in shame." The word sank into Awa's heart like a seed. Still, she turned and walked toward the door. Downstairs, the grand parlor echoed with raised voices. Madame Kenny and Yenda. "You cannot erase this," Yenda was saying, her tone sharp as steel. "If you claim her, you destroy everything you built. Think of your name, your wealth." Kenny's voice broke. "And if I lose her, what am I left with? Empty halls, empty mirrors, nothing but ghosts." Awa froze just outside the door, her chest tightening. Yenda hissed, "Then choose wisely. Either keep her out, or let me tell the world what you've hidden." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Kenny spoke, her voice trembling yet fierce. "Get out of my house, Yenda. If the world must know, then let it. But I will not deny her again." The door burst open, and Yenda stormed past, her face dark with fury. She brushed against Awa, sneering. "Foolish girl, you'll ruin her." Awa's heart pounded. She stepped into the parlor. Madame Kenny stood at the window, her back rigid, her shoulders trembling. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kenny turned. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. She walked forward slowly, each step heavy. When she reached Awa, she sank to her knees. The sight stunned Awa, the proud, untouchable Madame Kenny, kneeling before her. Her voice broke as she spoke. "Forgive me. I was a coward. I gave you away because I was afraid of scandal, of judgment, of losing everything. And then they told me you died. I buried you in my heart to survive. But you are here, flesh and blood, my child." Awa's chest tightened painfully. Tears slid down her cheeks. "You left me," she whispered. "All my life, I wondered who I was. I served in strangers' houses. I grew up with nothing. Do you know how many nights I cried asking why my mother did not want me?" Kenny bowed her head lower, her tears falling onto the marble floor. "I know, and I will carry that sin until my last breath. But if you allow me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be what I once failed to be, your mother." The silence between them was long, fragile. Finally, Awa bent down, lifting the broken necklace from her bag. She placed it in Kenny's hands. "This is all I had of you," Awa said softly. "If you truly mean it, then let's mend it together." Kenny's sobs broke free, raw and unguarded. She clutched the necklace to her chest, then pulled Awa into her arms. For the first time, mother and daughter held each other. Not as strangers bound by secrets, but as family reclaimed by truth. Mama Abby stood quietly in the doorway, her eyes shining. At last, the House of Silence had spoken. Days later, the mansion no longer felt hollow. Awa moved from her tiny maid's room into a small study near Kenny's office. She enrolled in evening classes in management, encouraged by her mother, who now sat proudly at her side. The halls once heavy with ghosts were filled with voices, footsteps, laughter. Where shame once ruled, hope now bloomed. And one evening, as the sun poured golden light across the terrace, Kenny fastened the mended red necklace around Awa's neck. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Never again will I let you go." Awa touched her mother's hands and smiled through her tears. Then let the past stay buried. We begin today. The mansion glowed in the fading light, no longer a prison of secrets, but a home reborn. And to those who listened to their story, one truth lingered, that no matter how deep the silence, love, once spoken, has the power to heal.